name is Robert Shoup. I'm the director at Palmdale City Library, and we are thrilled to begin a new program series offered in a virtual format for now. We look forward to the time when we can offer this program, different versions of it in person as well, but as everyone knows, because of COVID, we have not been able to offer in-person programs for over a year. But we are starting this virtual program today, and I look forward to sharing a little bit more information here in a few moments about that. But before we get started, hopefully you're joining us on our YouTube channel at Palmdale City Library. And I want to tell you a little bit about the library. If you're not aware, the library has reopened to walk-in services beginning on March 22nd. We have limited capacity in the building still, and so unfortunately, there's not a place to sit. We can only allow patrons to come in for an hour at a time. However, those that are coming are thoroughly enjoying being able to use the computers again and do some self-printing and browse the collection themselves. We still offer phone reference and pickup service. You can check out the books over the phone, and then we will bag them up, and you can come pick them up at the front door. Well, actually, you have to come in now, but just inside the front door. So that's a little bit about the services we're providing. We look forward to, hopefully soon, to be able to have in-person programs as soon as possible once again. Just briefly, our hours, currently we're running a modified schedule still. So Monday through Thursday, we're open to the public from 10 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. On Friday and Saturday, we're open from 10 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. Please stay tuned to our website or call us here at the library. Our website is www.cityofpalmdale.org/library. And we'll be happy to help you through the website informational pieces and also if you give us a call. Now, if you know anything about our library, you know that we love offering programs. We really miss the in-person programs, as I've mentioned, but we are grateful for the opportunity to offer virtual programs as well. And this is a new program series that we're launching with this particular session. We're calling it Palmdale City Library Supports the Arts program series. The plan and intent is that at least once a month for now, we plan to pre-record a virtual program that you can enjoy, and we will let you know when it's going to be, and you can enjoy it when we post it, but it'll be on our YouTube channel for you to view at your convenience. This first one we will be posting on Saturday, May 22nd at 10 a.m. And then thereafter, it'll be there for you to go back and watch the rerun if you want, or to watch future programs as well. But this morning, I want to make a few introductions. The panel that we have here today, first I want to introduce Jamie Lee Beck. Jamie Lee, yeah, there's the wave. Jamie Lee is the assistant director here at Palmdale City Library. She's a longtime resident of the Antelope Valley, and she saw the light and got her library degree, and she works here at the library. And I apologize that my phone is ringing, but that happens, doesn't it, in this format. So Jamie Lee is here, and sometimes she may host this program in the future as well. Today, I have two special guests. I'm going to give you some brief bio information about them, and I'll turn the rest of the time over to them. First of all, I have Jesse Davidson. Jesse is nodding. A little bit about Jesse. He was born and raised in Antelope Valley. Yeah, that was a good way. Jesse's been a bassist since his early teens. He's been involved in the local music scene since 2010. He's been working professionally since 2012 in Southern California. He's worked at Lancaster Performing Arts Center. He's been teching for Last in Line, Lita Ford, Venice, and others, and touring as an independent musician with Reverend Red and Rogue. In August 2018, Jesse began writing for Antelope Valley Press, covering the local music scene with a weekly column appearing in the showcase section of the paper. So if you have not seen that, I encourage you to check it out. I've become aware of it. Jesse is a great writer, besides being a musician and such. So Jesse, we'll turn over to you here in just a moment, but briefly, I'm going to share. We have so Jesse is going to be our facilitator for this program, and really appreciate this partnership that we're entering into, and we're excited about offering this. Jesse has made arrangements to have our special guest here today, and that is Ian McCartor. Ian just smiled, and now he's waiting. Thank you. Yeah, that was your cue. So a little bit about Ian. Ian is a singer-songwriter who has worked as a hospice nurse here in the Antelope Valley to create what are called legacy songs. Very cool program. It's a unique service Ian has developed that honors the experiences of those nearing the ends of their lives. Legacy songs are a special way for people to share something not only with their loved ones, but also with many others, as Ian performs the stories and songs in his inspirational repertoire as a recording artist. This is his way of honoring the older generations, and today he's going to share how we all can do our part to document the stories of our own elders. And Ian has a legacy album, Star or Eyes to See the Wind. Did I get that right?
Both. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, 2 albums. Okay, thank you. And I've listened to some of Ian's works online, and I can highly recommend those. So without further ado, again, we welcome you, and I want to turn it over to Jesse and Ian.
Thank you, Robert. So, as Robert mentioned, I'll be curating and booking events in this series for the Palmdale Library, and this is sort of to bridge the gap between the city of Palmdale and the library and the arts community in town. And I figured this would be a great way to start off this series with Ian, because this is a way to bring, with this theme today, is bringing older and younger generations together. And this type of lecture and hopefully in-person events as things open up will be sort of a preview of what's to come with the library series. And today our theme is capturing the legacy of relatives in your family or the story of your family through older generations and being able to pass that on and carry that lineage forward. So Ian, being the singer-songwriter that he is and the poetic, literary-minded person that he is, this is also a great addition to the library, and I think really sets the tone for this first lecture quite well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian, and then there will be a brief Q&A at the end.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. And thank you all who are watching for joining us. It's an honor to be able to kick off this program. I think given the nature of this work, it's very applicable to the theme of a library because, you know, there's many books in a library and there's many stories in mankind, and what good is books or stories if nobody reads or nobody listens, but most importantly, if nobody lives those lessons. And so with the work that I've done, I'll tell you a little bit about the background and the process and what I've learned from it, and then provide some ideas of how everyone can do a similar thing and the potential benefit of doing so. And so I have always worked as a songwriter. It's always kind of been my joy in my young adult life. And then I eventually ended up becoming an RN through good old Antelope Valley College, our local wonder, and a great program, and was able to learn songwriting through a teacher at AV College as well. And so those worlds kind of came together. And as I was able to go into the medical field, I would witness, of course, many elders and many people in general with the unique perspective. You know, there was a preciousness to time all of a sudden for many people. And with that preciousness, there becomes this sense of urgency to tell story or to leave something behind, perhaps with the word of legacy that we're all familiar with. You know, we all of a sudden become very concerned that, you know, we may not have too much time left to give something back. And from what I found, one of the most resolving factors of life is looking back on a life full of giving back. And that's easily done through story and passing along wisdom. And it's a very simple thing, but many times in our modern world, it's very distracted. and it's easy to just let things pass day to day to day and miss these stories. And I would get an idea of this over the years as I would just witness all these people, um, many times disconnected from their families because there wasn't this sense of acceptance and there was a lot of denial. And so when I eventually left medical nursing and became a hospice nurse, I found a different environment to where that end, or if you will, that change was more accepted. And it was like, okay, this is what we have now. What can we do and what can we give, instead of resisting without the willingness to change or to accept the potential. And so with that, I've found connecting the songwriting process as a service is something I've developed over the past 5 years. It's what's called legacy songwriting. And essentially, as a songwriter with the background as hospice nurse, I sit with people who have something to say, and I bring the families in and I facilitate this environment of reflection and of intention of honoring that person that has lived a full life. And sure, they may have mistakes, but when witnessed in that capacity, they become lessons, and essentially they become proverbial books that we keep within us. You know, it's volumes of wisdoms, and it brings a sense of hope to create something new from it. You know, the song in this process is more of a symbol, and it becomes a reminder or a compass to those left behind after that person's passed away, that, you know, when things start getting difficult, or, you know, you start approaching life's challenges, that song can be a trigger to elevate your perspective and to live with more hopeful intention to carry on that legacy of what that person has left behind. And then for those that are nearing the end, for example, our elderly in general, um, it's just a way for them to share something very tangible. You know, it's a way simply to witness another human being who's departing, and empowering them with the wisdom that they have and the value that they have. And in a world where youth and wealth and fame and all these things are so magnified as valuable, the quiet, wise voice of those who actually lived are much less noticeable most of the time, or in many cases repelling for our modern culture. You know, we don't want to face death. We don't want to face aging because we see ourselves in those people, and that's uncomfortable. We want to grasp so much of what is just ends up, from what I've learned, just total smoke. It's just grasping at the wind. But when we can engage with these people in a way to where we allow them to be fully human in their experience and express all of the triumphs and all of the failures and all of the in-betweens of their life, we can identify with it better, and then in theory apply it, and then better live ourselves. And in other cultures, this is much more prevalent. You know, I spent a lot of time in Greece and in Mexico in particular, and in Italy, and the elderly just seem to generally be more integrated in that sharing of experiences and supporting that elderly when they're lacking capacity. The framework is set up a little differently to where they're not quite so isolated, and their lives are more engaged with young modern lives. And then that way, there seems to be more of a continuity of the past and the present, and then equipping older human tools for that next generation's future. And so it just seems like there's more like a stable, even progression of generations in those cases. And so I ended up coming back to the Antelope Valley during COVID times, and boy, did I learn a few things. Um, I started partnering more full-time as a legacy songwriter with a local hospice that I was one of the first nurses for a few years ago when they started. Antelope Valley Supportive Care and Hospice, led by Dr. Coda. Love that guy. And throughout COVID, I was able to engage with these people who were facing some pretty severe isolation. And in a time where they're on hospice, for one, and their mortality is very real and their fragility is very recognized. And then they're alone with their television and hearing about all the terrors of the last year. It's just, I can't imagine. If I didn't have my personal resources, I would try to put myself in their shoes and to just be like, oh my gosh, like, what can you do about that kind of isolation and that kind of the impending doom sensation that I get from a lot of people. And so with the legacy songwriting, it was a way for me to kind of bring a little bit of a bridge to them, a bit more hope, in the sense that within their isolation, they could be free to express their opinions and their fears, and then also their hopes for the world. There's one woman I spoke with who was in the midst of it all, and she inspired the song Wolves and Doves in her interviews on Eyes to See the Wind. And she was able to voice her concerns of our modern culture and just kind of get that off her chest, and to surrender her perspective of love as the answer. And we hear these stereotypical phrases, as we call them, for our whole lives, but then you hear them from the mouths of these people, given the context of their experiences, and it just takes on a whole new life. They become so true and understandable, after you hear their story and then they come to that gem, then you're just like, oh my gosh, like it makes so much sense now. And so then it's up for me to interpret it through song and to encapsulate it in a way that's palatable, as well. These themes and these stories, they stand alone as interviews, and documentation is kind of a library approach of chronicling these people. But then the song is just my artist's way of symbolizing all of what they said in a lovely little bite-sized package. And so since then, we've partnered quite a bit with different organizations and medical groups. We're backed by the VA down in San Diego. And I've worked quite a bit with private clients who just hear about it through the Facebook and the Patreon and my different articles and presentations like this. And so I thought today it would be very appropriate to share a way for anyone to do this kind of thing. And honestly, the concept is very simple, and I think piggybacking on this past time that we've all gone through, I think as I was reflecting recently, we all have a deeper sensitivity to what it feels like to be alone and what it feels like to be isolated. And I think that can be a gift. I think that can give us a lot of compassion for those who are older than us and have done this long before it was a thing. To be stuck in your room, stuck in your house, unable to do what you want to do anymore, or unable to contribute back to the world like you're used to, is a very difficult issue in an existential sense as a human being. It's like we're programmed to give. I think naturally the desire is to serve and to find relevance through contribution. And so for those of you listening, it would be nice if you could just take that thought to heart and to think, if you've had moments where you've been isolated in the past year with this pandemic, allow that to put yourself in the elder's shoes and to feel a moment of what it's like not only to be alone, but to know that your time is limited on top of that. If you knew you had a stopwatch of, you don't know when it's going to stop, but it's shorter than it used to be. When you're at that age, it could be anytime. So with that, on top of the loneliness and the isolation and the desire to connect and the desire to give, maybe that could be a compelling factor to inspire the action of actually getting in front of somebody and witnessing them. And as a tool for this, I recommend this wonderful book, but it's probably backwards on Zoom, but it's called The 5 Secrets You Must Discover Before You Die. The author's John Izzo. Get it on Amazon. But I read this book at the helm of this project years ago, and it's this collection of interviews that were done with this fella, Dr. Izzo, and his team to find what matters in life from this pretty expansive demographic of people. You know, it's like he pulled a large number of people to recommend to him and his team the wisest people that they knew, or the wisest person. And then they went and they screened everybody, and they used this special questionnaire to identify these common themes in life. And in his book, he nails it down to 5, and they're very strong points, and they're universally relatable. And that's what I love about this kind of process. It's exploring the human condition, and it's documenting something that otherwise would go unspoken and very likely forgotten. And the one thing that I witnessed in my hospice days, and starting to introduce these legacy songs as a service, I'd find that people, when they gathered, and just in that simple afternoon, just for that hour, everybody would marvel at just like, oh my gosh, I never knew that about you, or I never would have expected that, or like I had no idea. And looking back, they're like, oh my gosh, like that never would have been spoken, or likely that we never would have known that, and we never would have been able to apply that from our loved one if we hadn't have just simply sat down and asked. And I think many people don't want to impose. I think that's another blocking factor to this, is like, you know, there's many of us who are eager to surrender a suggestion. And, you know, we all know people like that who are just like, oh, there they go again. But then a lot of people, a lot of very wise people are quiet, and they're modest. And many times they're so humble that they don't realize that they have anything valuable to give. And they'll just be like, I had no idea. Like, that I'm not wise. I made a lot of mistakes, you know, or, you know, they don't identify their own virtues. You know, that's for us to extract and to honor. And using this book, I would say if you read it, and if you take it to heart and observe the questionnaire in the background, that the intention of is actually to provide us with our own little roadmap for interviewing our own wise elders. And then just making a simple phone call, be like, hey grandma, can we talk? And then just off you go. It can be as formal or informal as possible. Sometimes formality can be paralyzing, and people are all dolled up and they're nervous, and it's a big deal, and then you get stage fright in a way, or red light fever in the recording studios, as we call it, and you're not yourself sometimes. So sometimes just going for it and saying, this might be the only chance that we have to have this conversation. And you just talk, or do it again and again. You know, sometimes one conversation leads to a novel's worth of conversations. It's crazy. Just like I've had multiple sessions with people who, once you just get that little floodgate open to crack, you know, the water just starts coming out, and a lifetime flows forth. And with that, just incredible wisdom and just down to earth living knowledge. And that's hard to find these days. And the benefit goes both ways, is that you get to witness something very special and very, very true. And in a world where the truth can be somewhat ambiguous, and painted. This is a very refreshing gateway into honesty. And one thing that I found about the end of life and essentially impending mortality is that desire to perform can be relieved, and that facade becomes irrelevant in many cases. And so many people's desire is just to be honest and to be like, this is it, this is the end, here I am, and this is all I am. And that's priceless. It's very hard to find, but it's right under our noses. And and let me see, I had another note here. Oh, and so for an application of just locally something to do, I partner with Palmdale Trophy to do plaques of the lyrics. And it's a way that I kind of combine the intangibility of the song with something tangible to symbolize, as like a commemoration that they can have physically in a household. And so after I compose the song, I have the lyrics inscribed on a cherry wood and gold plaque, and I give that to the patient and the family, and for them to hold it and to feel that something physical has been represented in what they've expressed. It's really powerful. And so I was thinking of just an access point for everyone who's watching. After they have that conversation with their elder, and I recommend recording it. I just record all mine on the iPhone. I just have a little voice memo. Simple. It's not a big microphone in your face. It's not intimidating. It's just recording on the side. You go back over the interview. After you're done talking, don't just let it sit and disintegrate, but like return to that conversation. And what I do in the songwriting process, that's a very essential point, because I can remember a few things. It's the whole learning retention theory. It's like you only remember like a fraction of the percentage of what you hear in like a lecture, for example. And so this essentially is a lecture. But if you re-engage with it as soon as possible after, and take notes on the meaningful points of things that specifically struck you, you'll remember way more, and you'll be able to in essence integrate way more, and for simply that person's being be able to integrate more with you and your being, to where that's the whole point. It's a gateway for them to be a part of you and to continue living after their physical form's gone. Their influence will remain in you. And we learn from that our entire lives, from everybody we witness and engage with. We can't help but be influenced. But from what I found from the end of life, those categories of self are very much more focused, and they can be that much more piercing, effective, and relatable, to where that's like, the gold at the end of the road. It's like you're able to take that gold and to be like, all right, I can choose to spend this well. It's like an inheritance in a way, an inheritance of perspective. And with the tangible idea of the plaque, I think it'd be interesting if people could potentially take like a sentence or like a core theme of that interview from their loved one. And if you're not a songwriter, of course, this would be kind of something similar to that, about condensing an idea. If you're a poet, wonderful, write a poem. But for most people, I think something simple would be to just re-listen to that interview and identify a phrase, or like that one perfect sentence that's in there, or a general concept that they interpreted from it, and call up Palmdale Trophy and be like, hey, I want to make something special for my family. And it's, has to do with the legacy program, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we know exactly what to do. And then to present this as an homage of like, thank you for being who you are and for sharing this truth with us. In this, among many other things, but this right here will be something that we make sure we remember. And sometimes it can be as simple as just directly asking that person, what matters most to you? And let them think about it for a second. And usually something very crisp comes out. And it's typically very profound and very simple and absolutely relatable in all the cases that I've spoken with. And then that way it's like the concept of enjoying a part of a eulogy before you're not around to enjoy it anymore. It's like you get to celebrate intentionally with that person for something very real that they're leaving behind, and having a celebration of life before it's called a celebration of life, like a memorial. It's like this book, Tuesdays with Maury, which is another wonderful book by Mitch Albom. It was a wise old professor who was dying from ALS, which is a progressive degenerative disease that affects your muscle and progressively paralyzes you from the bottom up until your diaphragm doesn't work anymore, and then essentially you die. And so he knew this was happening, and he was reflecting as like this is his final classroom to teach his students. And Mitch, the author, was an old student from college that then became a writer and then became his witness at the bedside and his companion. And one really interesting point that Maury made, the fellow who was dying, he's like, well, I won't be able to enjoy my eulogy when I'm gone, so why not let's just do it now. And so he had a little mini funeral where all his friends came, and they all got to just discuss these things that Maury could just revel in before he passed away. And he said it was like the most wonderful thing, because he's like, well, it's all well and good that people, reflect on the good that I brought to the world after I'm gone, but I'd rather hear and like rejoice in that now while I can. And then from there, get even more ideas of how to give further until he's actually gone. And it's actually a very inspirational kind of chain reaction, that with that hope, knowing that you do have the potential to give still in this capacity, literally until you're no longer able to, whether physically or mentally disoriented towards the end. And then that just leads to more opportunities to serve and to live fully until you're gone. I had one patient, he was very young, he was in his 40s, and he was dying of cancer. And he accepted the fact that he was still alive. Even though he was dying, he didn't give up. And he was in so much pain, so many complications of digestive problems and stuff, and just pretty much the most uncomfortable man you can picture. And there was something in his perspective that is very rare in people that I've found in his circumstances, to where he was good-humored, he was brave, and he was willing to give in the face of this fear, and without a hint of denial, which is very rare as well. He was saying goodbye to a whole family and many friends, and he was kind of a public icon in his community that was very leaned on for guidance. And so a lot of people were feeling this pain. And he was like, I'm not dead until I'm dead. He's like, I can still give. I can still give love in the context of all this fear. And with that incredible challenge to surmount it, so much more powerful is that love. It's like in face of that challenge and that trial, everything that he gave was magnified that much more. It's an incredible example to the rest of us. And I think to show that ideal and to connect that to other people to where that potential abides is very key, because I think everybody needs to learn by example, including the dying and including the old, to where you get this idea, and we all can relate in our younger lives of just like, what's the point? Why am I trying so hard? I feel weary. nothing I do is making any progress. It's not really doing any good. You know, all that self-talk can be really destructive. Can you imagine the self-talk in the end, faced with that kind of just the beat down of your body shutting down, your spirits being crushed, and reflecting on who knows how many regrets in life. And that stuff can be completely overpowering. And so for us to integrate stories of these people who are the ideals and they are the hopes that we all can embody and pass those along even to other people who are suffering, and to use that as this bridge of potential for people who just wouldn't know otherwise. Some people just haven't considered the example or the potential of being able to give in light of such pain, and how precious a gift that could be for the rest of us, and how satisfying and encouraging that can be for the person actually giving, that it can give them a tool like a North Star or a beacon of some kind to overcome that doubt and that fear or that you know, that dread. You know, it completely can shift a perspective from being so inward to being outward. And from what I've found in any stage of life, that switch of perspective is key. You know, the more that you're concerned about yourself and your own well-being and your own challenge and torment, you know, it's you're not able to give, and you're not able to release those things, or in many cases you're not able to let those things go. You're not able to let the past just be what it needs to be and let it lie and move on to the future or to that present moment. And in that seems to be magnified in the end with people, and it just becomes symbolic for the rest of us and how to live each day with this sense of gratitude and hope. And so you'll be surprised as you sit with these people and you start engaging in these elements of legacy and start intentionalizing these lessons to embody and to continue on. And as far as a way to share those things that you've learned, I have a Patreon that I host, and it's people I've worked with in hospice, families that have worked with me in the legacy capacity that have lost loved ones. And we all get together at the beginning of every month on a live stream, and we get to start off with these certain intentions of reflecting on what those people have left behind, how we can integrate them and share them and live better together, and use these perspectives as tools to consider our own legacies, and how each day in our own stories will be what we think about when we're in the end. And when we too are those elders lying in those beds, reflecting on meaning and what time we have left and what we can still give. I think the earlier you consider those things, the better potential for a richer life. And so highly recommend that book. And I think we're coming to the end of our time. My little clock is saying that it's time to bring Jesse in now.
Well, thank you, Ian. That was absolutely beautiful with the whole presentation that you just gave. There was a couple points that I think you really hit on that I think really struck me during all of that, and that the truth can be really ambiguous. And because family, or even not necessarily family by blood, but people who may have raised you that, you know, were family friends or people that you're really close with that you consider family, these are things that can cut through a lot of the petty fog of life in a way that just watching somebody else's story may or may not resonate with you. And in our culture, you had touched on, you know, that you've traveled to all these different places and traveled to, you know, Greece and Mexico and have been all over the world, literally. And in other cultures, elderly people have more of a direct lineage, and, you know, ancestry has more of a connection to the way we live our lives than in America necessarily. And it's just something that's kind of a part of our culture. And I'm not sure if that's how it always was, but I think it's good to remember that, this lineage that we carry on, these lessons learned by our grandparents and our great grandparents and even our parents, can carry weight that we might not necessarily think about. And a couple questions I wanted to ask you just before we wrap up. I'm sure with the amount of people that you've encountered and various personality types, you've encountered many stoic people, as you mentioned, or even just wise people that are very humble, or, even perhaps shy. Is as odd as that sounds, people can remain shy for their whole life potentially. So, um, with trying to ask these questions and get these stories, this is something that might take some time in doing, with getting people to open up. So, would you have any specific techniques or things that you've used that, like you said, some people may be very open to, they'll tell you a story every 5 minutes, about something that they've encountered. Other people, it would take months to get one story potentially. So, any thoughts on trying to get people to open up, or ways that you've been able to work around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with respect. It's not like you're trying to pry something from somebody. It's
Right.
meeting them where they're at. And people sense respect, and they sense intention many times just subconsciously. It's just something, it's like a vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And when I approach these people, I try to be as respectful as possible and be like, you share whatever you want to share. And I am an open book for you. And all who are here, whether family or friends, sometimes it's just me and the client. And it's just, I'm ready to receive what you have to give, because I want to give what you have to
Right.
others through who I am.
Right.
And that's very key, is to just be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it has to do with memory. It's like sometimes the elderly can't engage with that long-term memory right away. And for the song Highland Park, was this gal that I sat with, and she's just like, I don't know what to share, I don't know what to say, because I can't really remember anything. Like, my life's been this blur.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, let's just start somewhere. And we just started talking about, either her childhood up or here back. And we kind of just wove everything together. And then by the end of it, she's like laughing. She's like, oh my gosh, like, I haven't thought of this stuff since it happened.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, these are memories that I completely forgot, or I thought I did. And here we are, blowing the dust off these books. And she's like, this is wonderful. Like, I've never felt like this before. And it just comes from reflection.
Yeah,
It's walking
absolutely.
down memory lane, but with a certain intention to it. It's like, it's to celebrate.
Oh, absolutely. And, with the way our culture also is sort of set up, you can live a whole life and you can live in the moment from moment to moment. And sometimes you might not think of a lot of these experiences. They're stored and locked away in your mental archive until somebody says something that reminds you of that experience or starts asking you questions. And like you said, it gets, that processed engaged for the individual. And then it becomes a completely different ball game at that point. And then now you've almost transported somebody back to that period in time, I would imagine, because they're
Mhm.
reliving these experiences.
Right.
Yeah. And then another question I had for myself, this is something I've encountered with certain relatives and grandparents. I think I'm glad that you brought up the point about just calling somebody up just to talk and eliminating the formality out of it, because I think even for the person asking the questions, that could be intimidating. I wanted to
Sure.
ask, at first, was there any awkwardness that you had to overcome with asking these questions? Because for myself, I know that sometimes asking people about the past, especially if they've had somewhat of a difficult past, but it's something that you want to know about, you can feel awkward as a individual for asking those questions.
Yeah. And honestly, like, just given my nature, it still can be awkward. I
Mm-hmm.
can still have this intimidation to it, like, oh my gosh, like, what if they don't like this question? What if it's
Mm-hmm.
too uncomfortable? What if it closes them off?
Yeah.
The typical doubts of most people can relate to.
Yes.
I've definitely not matured completely beyond these things. And so it's good for me as well to be able to get that ego out of the way and to learn that perspective of humility and the service of what this question hopefully will provide this person, or what this conversation will bring to them as a form of healing and expression. And once I'm abiding in that perspective, it's fine. It's what's needed. And some of these questions are hard, you know. It's, man, there's one that I was just talking about with some colleagues the other day, and it's question number 2 on this thing. It's what has brought you the greatest sense of meaning and purpose in life? Why does it matter that you were alive?
Yeah.
And some people are like, why does it matter that I was alive?
Yeah.
That's a
yeah.
And then you just see it in their eyes.
Yeah.
They're just like thinking like, do I have any meaning? Sometimes it's just like that passes through their mind. But typically they come to be like, oh, well, my children, or oh, my life's work. And then they go from there, and all that they've learned from contributing in that sense. But, you know, sometimes the traumas of the past come up, and, you know, there's some deep, brutal stuff that some people go through their whole life and they never talk about. And the end is their last chance. And sometimes they feel like they just have to share it with somebody. And that can be intimidating in a sense of where you're there for them to simply hold space, to witness this pain, and then to say, thank you. I've learned from this, and I love you for who you are, and for sharing the honesty of your humanity with me. And that can be really healing. It's just a purging. And the witness is all it takes many times, just to be known.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's something to where it will help normalize things like that in your life or for other people in, you know, your social circle. And it's good to get things out there in the open like that, just to, you know, to whatever extent that that person feels comfortable with sharing it. And it just gives it goes back to that word that you kept talking about, which was perspective. And it's a good perspective enhancer for your life, and that not getting caught up in so much of the small things and, you know, other things of that nature that we get really wrapped up with in everyday life. And yeah, lastly, I just hope that this sort of inspires creativity in people where it wouldn't otherwise be, because as you mentioned with working with Palmdale Trophy, you know, this is something to where if you interview somebody and you were to create a little plaque or a little, you know, in memoriam sort of thing for whoever, you know, is on the, whoever that person is in your life, it can, that is a creative moment in somebody where they may not have had one otherwise. We sort of take for granted that we have an ability to create. I wouldn't say take for granted, but it can be second nature to where you can pick up your guitar and you can easily sort of start to begin the process of articulating your feelings on a subject. If you're able to write, you can sit down and write a simple poem, or at least, you know, articulately journal how you feel. But people who may not have that outlet, this is a good way to get the ball rolling and to start brainstorming and thinking about, well, what are some ways that this person means to me? What were they into? What did they like? Maybe we can tie the two together. Maybe asking these questions will spur an idea of, well, maybe we can immortalize somebody in this way, you know, and have something to pass along. There was a service I saw online where you can get your ashes pressed into a vinyl record. You know, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I saw that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I saw that and went, okay. It's like, that's the first thing I felt fit me as a person, you know.
The musician's dream. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
I am
exactly.
the music now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so I hope that this gets the ball rolling for that creative discussion for people.
I think so. I think it holds a lot of potential, and just perhaps a less traditional trajectory. You know, it's like there's just been this is what happens. It's all this. And from what I've seen, a lot of times that human element, or like that inspiration that art brings, is absent. And
Absolutely.
with this, supplement, especially personally with what I hope to offer with the legacy work, it adds this life to it that otherwise wouldn't be there. And it's yeah, I mean, there's no other more appropriate word. It brings life to the end, and to where I had, just on a closing note, I will never forget this little vignette of when I presented a song to this gal who was nearing the end, and she sensed there was no hope, there was no point. She wished it was all over. And I shared her song with her, and she had her little earphones on, and she was holding her plaque, just riveted on the plaque. And the song was over, and she stayed there staring at that plaque for like 5 minutes. And then finally she kind of snapped out of it and pulled her earphones off, and she says, I get it. This is me, and this is alive. And this will go on after I am no longer here. This is wonderful.
Wow.
And that was just like, yes, I want to bring that to everybody. And it's like the arts can be your ambassador, it can be that element of lasting spirit that can bring some comfort, knowing that there was an element of meaning that was enhanced that wouldn't be there otherwise.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I thank you so much for coming in here today and, talking about your process. And hopefully this inspires more creativity and art in our community and helps sort of bridge a gap between older and younger generations, and, bring some perspective to the big picture of how we're all in this, sort of together in some way, in some form. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Ian. And I think we can add links to your stuff below in the description on YouTube. So please go to Ian's website, ianmccartor.com, and you can learn more about the legacy songs and his work, and you can hear samples of his music and find out more about his Patreon page. And thank you to Robert Shoup of the Palmdale Library and Jamie Lee for recording this. And thank you so much to the city of Palmdale for allowing this on their platform. We really appreciate it. And this is a preview of the kind of events we'll be having here, and we will have another online lecture series next month. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.